everyone. So like Tim said, this is cloud compliance with InSpec and Automate. So let's just get it started. So first things first, as soon as that little bottom thing goes away, all of this all starts with InSpec, right? Automate 2 is based off of all the things that InSpec 2 can do. So with InSpec, with InSpec 2, we introduced some new functionality where we can now do what we call in the Automate UI API scanning. It's account service scanning. It's scanning your AWS and Azure services. We also still have that traditional EC2 and VM scanning, that's the SSH WinRM scanning that we've always had. So what does that mean? Rick's going to walk you through some of those examples now.
Thank you. So, I don't know who has or who has not seen an InSpec control or a profile, but the way it works is that you have profiles, right? And profiles contain tests. We call them controls. And so we're just going to put a couple of them up on the board so that you can see them and try to appreciate the simplicity of them, right? It's the first line gives a little ID name for it. The next one is the impact. So those are how critical you know that your tests are, if they fail. A title, a description, and they're pretty readable. I mean, this one here is saying like the host-to-host authentication is really something that a best practice says that it should be either correctly configured or non-existent. And so this test simply says it should not exist. And if it did exist, your test would fail. This one, the prior one was in the Linux baseline profile, just so you know. This is a part of the Windows baseline profile. This one is just saying, the landman workstation parameters should exist as a registry set, and the plain text passwords should not be enabled. Again, if it fails, you'll know it. This one says that the world should not have access to port 22. And this one says that your disk should be encrypted. Up at the top, we've listed to the right in parentheses the profile that these come from, or the foundation. CIS, in case you don't know, is the Center for Internet Security Standards. And it's a set of rules. And for Azure and for AWS, we implement our translation of those rules into InSpec profiles and controls. AWS is complete. Azure is a work in progress. And each day we make more and more of that progress. Should be done very soon. So those are controls.
Yeah, and those first two examples you saw, right, were the ones that you've probably traditionally used if you've used InSpec before. It's the SSH and WinRM scanning. The second two are those new bits where InSpec has the ability to now say an AWS backend or an Azure backend and test that service. So now we kind of brought you through the intro of what InSpec 2 has allowed us to do in Automate. So what is compliance in Automate? Compliance in Automate, we're scanning your infrastructure regardless of configuration management tools used, just like InSpec does. That's always been InSpec's stance, right? We can scan your infrastructure. We don't care if you use Chef, Puppet, Ansible, whatever. But now it's taken a step further. So instead of just SSH and WinRM scanning and saying we don't care what configuration management tools you use, we can scan you. Now what we can say is we can also scan your AWS services, your Azure services, network devices, APIs. We are starting to scan all the things because your infrastructure is not just your nodes, it's all of it all together. And there are vulnerabilities across all of those different situations. So what does compliance reporting provide the user with that a simple InSpec scan doesn't, right? So with an InSpec scan, you can, of course, InSpec exec. If you wanted to scan your US East 1 region with a profile that had that control that we saw earlier, you would do an InSpec exec AWS:// US East 1 with that profile, and you would get those results right there in your command line. With Automate, what we can do is we can automate the process of running those scans and in a scheduled way. So you can have those scans run once a day, once a week, every 5 minutes, whatever you want. The other thing that Automate provides us with is integrations. So what we've done in Automate is we've introduced the idea of integrations, and you saw that a little bit on the screen this morning, where we have a screen where you can add in your AWS creds, or if you're running an EC2, just read in the creds from your environment. And what that does is it automatically goes and discovers all the nodes that are in your infrastructure. Now, if you want to do one of those account service scans, I'm going to keep on switching on words on that, so just account service, API scan, just follow it. That is going to add a node for, basically a node for each of those regions, because those are the InSpec targets. So we're treating all of these as the scannables. So it's automating the process of discovering the scannables. The other thing that Automate is going to provide you with, of course, is those pre-baked profiles. Like Rick mentioned, we have those pre-baked profiles that are based on CIS standards. So we showed you an example of an AWS control from the AWS Foundation's profile that is shipped with Automate right now. We also, if any of you have used Automate in the past, know that we have the CIS row profiles, Windows profiles across a whole bunch of different OSs, and those are regularly updated every time Automate is updated.
So we provide a bird's eye view of your infrastructure, the state of your infrastructure. What that means is that let's say you have 10,000 nodes, and well, you're not going to just want to look at a list with a row for each node, right? You want aggregated numbers: how many passed, how many failed, how many were skipped. What does it look like over time, right? I can look at today, that's fine, but wouldn't it be nice if I had a nice trend graph which shows me over time what my infrastructure has been doing from those perspectives? And we have that. We offer that. We have bubble graphs. You'll see all this stuff in a little while. We're going to do a live demo, which will be fun. And so we allow you to see that bird's eye view. We see a lot of value in there. This is something that existed in Automate 1, but there are some improvements that I think you'll really think are delightful. All the way down to, the current, the current scan of the current day. So let's say that you had one node, did one scan, and you were looking at it. Well, the aggregation would be solely made up of that. But if that one happened to fail or pass, you could drill right down to the scan report level and see exactly what passed or failed. So we go all the way from bird's eye down to individual record of tests. So we have a control as well as a node-centric view. What that means is, going back to, I have 10,000 nodes in my infrastructure. If I'm looking at the pass-failed skip data, that's all from that perspective. 10,000 nodes, I have 9,000 have passed, 1,000 have failed, right? You can also look at it from a control point of view. So I'm running X number of profiles across my infrastructure, varying depending on which nodes we're talking about. Some will pass, some will fail. When we're looking at the control-centric view of this, it's solely based on that. So if you had 100 controls and it failed across 1,000 nodes, you would see that 100,000 controls have failed. And again, with the full ability to drill all the way down to each individual. The trend graphs are really your historical bird's eye view of everything. The value in that is that you're able to see over time if your infrastructure is improving or getting worse. Hopefully your passes go up, your fails go down. That's what we try to show. If you notice that a node is failing the test, click on that individual node to see the report. I already touched on that. Yeah, if you're noticing that nodes are having a problem with a certain profile, you can actually get to the scan results just for that one particular profile. This is something. There are two levels of filtering that we think about. And currently, we have what we call shallow filtering, right? So if you said, I am interested in all of my nodes that have had the Linux baseline profile run on them, and let's say that you had 10,000 nodes and 5,000 had that one run, but the rest had, some other profile, CIS, AWS, whatever. The way it works is when you're looking at the pass, failed, and skip numbers for those, if those nodes ran that profile, the whole aggregate for that node would appear in the math on the pass, skipped, and failed. That's shallow filtering. On deep filtering, it would be, give me the numbers, even though that node ran that profile, well, if it also ran another profile, right, I don't want the summation of all the pass, skipped, and fails. I want them only to the extent that they pertain to the one thing I put in the filter. That's deep filtering. Deep filtering is something that's top of mind now that we've gotten this far with A2. Doesn't exist yet. First thing we're going to do when we get home.
So we just showed you a whole bunch of words on screens. And I know that's everybody's favorite, right? Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to move on to demo time so that you can see all the things that we were talking about. Because TLDR, we want to automate your scans. We want them to be repeatable. We want it to be easy. We want you to be able to see it from a bird's eye view down to every single detail that you want. So now we're going to actually move over to show you what is currently Automate. So are any of you currently using Automate 1 or have at some point touched it? Okay, so you've probably experienced a little bit about what we're just going to show you now. If I knew how to get screens right. It is a little mushy. Any screen experts want to help out with that? Well, yes, it's not. Good point. I can just.
That'll do.
It'll be okay, right?
It's fine.
Oh boy. All right. This is what happens when you go from presentation mode to live demo mode, is you end up in a bit of a funky world. But we're going to say that that's okay. So this is Automate 1. And Rick's going to talk to you about some of the differences that have happened.
Yeah, this is fun to demo. So you can see here that we have 9,900 nodes, right? And those who, raise your hand if you've used Automate 1. Raise your hand if you've had north of 1,000 nodes, 5,000 nodes. Okay. So what we're seeing here is 10,000 nodes, and it's spread out over a few days, not many. And it is not very delightful when it comes to this. Refreshing the page, and that takes a while. Now look at the trend graph on the bottom here. See that thing? It's not delightful. And our customers have pointed it out to us many times. Now, this is me and only me hitting this application. Just imagine if you had 25 people hitting this application. Just imagine if you had 150,000 nodes on there and you had 90 days worth of data. And imagine many people hitting this app. It would get less and less delightful. One thing that we've worked on, we've listened to our customers. This really bothered us quite a bit.
That one.
And we said, that can't be any longer the case. So now here we have 10,000, thank you. We have 10,000 nodes. I stuck with 10,000 nodes because I wanted to be apples and apples. 9,500 nodes, 9,900 nodes, 10,000 nodes. We're close, right?
Yeah. Did y'all see that refresh?
Yeah. That's the refresh, right? This page right here is calling 3 APIs, one for each pane. Each one of these APIs now returns in under 200 milliseconds, most of the time 100 milliseconds. And this is regardless of how many nodes you have. It used to be directly proportional to the number of nodes, the number of days, and the number of users hitting your page. As it stands right now, number of nodes is almost irrelevant. I mean, we've tested it with 150,000 nodes, and it was still under 300 milliseconds per API call. We didn't gather 90 days worth of data here, but because of the way that we went back and we really studied our data and tried to understand exactly how it works. And as a result, the way we do the math, the algorithms that we pick now in order to compute these numbers are, let me just say, there's so much less weight to them that it matters little how many days you're going across, how many nodes you have, and how many people are hitting it. And it's also much lighter on the back end in terms of memory consumption. We've reduced the amount of storage required for your Elasticsearch indices. So there's all kinds of improvements on this. Again, I'm just going to hit this. When I hit this, each one of these APIs gets called over and over. Nothing is being cached here. And this is the speed you're seeing. 2.6 million controls. That math is being crunched. Before my finger lifts that mouse pad, those numbers are crunched and rendered. So we're proud of this. This was a big achievement by the team to get it. And all across A2, this is the way we're thinking in Chef. You know, all of the teams and all of the different components have performance front and center in their mind. And the reason why is because, you know, when you look at the way it is in A1, I'll go back, as painful as it is. And we're proud of this too. I mean, these are all growing experiences, right? When we created this was, we knew we were doing the right thing, and we learned from our mistakes, and we took it forward into this. But the one thing I will say about this is when you're in here and you do this, you are reluctant to click on it because you know you're going to sit there and wait. Now, when it is 200 milliseconds, you click away. You have no fear. So that's just something we're very proud of.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that's awesome, right? Like, we've shown you, we had Automate 1, we recognized we didn't do that great of a job. So like they said this morning, Automate 2 was all about rebuilding it and rebuilding it the right way. And now we rebuilt it so that we have a lot more speed and we're able to handle more data so that we can please you, because we don't want to be shitty for you. So now we're going to move in and show you some of the node integrations that we were talking about. Now, this was briefly mentioned on the stage. You probably saw this screen. We'll see, whew, those icons are so tiny right now. Again, I'm sorry about the screen size. I did not take this into account. But right now, this instance is running in EC2. So what we can do when we're running in EC2 is we can go over and we can say, add integration. And I'm going to start by saying, you know what, I want to do Ec2 scans. So I want to discover all the nodes that this account has access to. And I don't want to include my credentials, so I'm going to attempt to click the tiny checkbox that says read credentials from my EC2 environment. And I'm going to call this my EC2 No Creds Manager, right? And I'm going to save that integration. Now, what it's doing in the background is we're going out and we're calling some of the AWS APIs on a dry run. And we're seeing if we have access to them, because of course you do need access to certain things like being able to read EC2 describe instances, EC2 describe regions, IAM list account aliases, all of those kinds of things. So we're checking that you have access to all of those APIs. Now, if we come over to the scan jobs, we're going to see that we have 15,321 nodes. I probably should have come over to this page first. We actually had 15,000. Those 321 are the nodes that were just added because we read in all of those instances. Now, when we come over here, we're going to see that 3 of them are reachable. If I come over to my EC2 over here, you're going to see that I've added 3 instances into the account. I added them into a different region so that we wouldn't have to, filter through everything. So I added them to a region where we didn't have anything, and I added the Amazon EC2 role for SSM to each of these instances. Now, an Amazon Linux and Windows instances automatically come with the SSM agent installed. And so if you attach the Amazon EC2 role for SSM, what we do in the background is when we're going through and we're saying, hey, EC2 describe instances, give me the information about all these instances, we are going ahead and checking, is the SSM ping online? If the SSM ping is online, that node will be marked as reachable. So that's why we end up with these 3 reachable nodes here that you can see have the same exact name that we got from AWS. We copy down all of your tags so that we have that same information on these nodes, because these are now in our database and we know about them. We know if they're running, we know if they're stopped, we know if you terminate them later. We are actually going through every 2 hours. Right now it's on a default of every 2 hours, but it is user configurable, to pull the AWS Instance Status API, EC2 Instance Status API, and find out the state of all of those nodes. So, running, stop, terminated, the exact same things I just said. So now we have 2 Linux instances here and 1 Windows instance. The cool thing about running Automate in EC2 and using the credentialless AWS scanning is it's completely permissionless. So I created these instances without attaching my SSH key to it. You know how there's that little button that's like, I'm doing this even though it's risky in AWS, and it says I'm going to do this without attaching my SSH cred, etc. So that's what we did. And now if we go over to the scan jobs, what we can do is we can create a new scan job, and we're going to click, and you see my 314 available nodes there. Now it's going to include all the nodes, whether or not they were marked reachable or unreachable, because it wants to allow you to set it the way you want, because then you could always go over in Amazon and give those instances the Amazon EC2 role for SSM at a later point. Say if you had a scheduled job, go in and add, right? And every time we do these queries, we are querying the AWS API directly. So it's not based on all the nodes that were added just now. If somebody goes into this account and adds 1 more node while we're talking, then the next time I would come around here, it would say 315, because we're always directly querying the primary node management system so that we always have the latest information. Now I can specify these by regions or tags. So here I'm going to say, hey, give me the ones that have the name VJ SSM Linux, and also give me the one that has VJ SSM Linux 2. I'm telling that scan job, I just want to run on nodes that have those 2 names. So now if I press next, I'm going to say, hey, those are Linux instances, so I'm going to choose the Linux security baseline. And I press next again, and I say SSM Linux job. And we could, of course, set a schedule. I'm not going to do that right now, but if you did set a schedule, then each time that job went to run, the resolver for the InSpec agent would go and query the AWS API and find any more instances that had that same name and add them into the job. So now when I press save, what we're going to do is we're going to use Amazon's run command to assemble a script that has the node UUID, the node name, all the information that we need, as well as the job ID, and send that directly over to Automate. So we're going into the instance, we're installing InSpec, and we're reporting back over to Automate. And now you can see we scanned 2 nodes, and it's completed. So if we press report, every time things work in a live demo, you kind of have to for a second. So we see that we got 2 nodes, and those 2 nodes are VJ SSM Linux and VJ SSM Linux 2. I didn't add any SSH or WinRM creds. This was all done because those 2 instances had an SSM ping online, so they had the SSM agent installed, and they had that Amazon EC2 role for SSM. Now, what we can also do is come over to the scan jobs. Hold on one second, I'm going to clear this filter because it's going to confuse us. And we can create a new job and say, you know what, I actually wanted to test my Windows one. So now if I come over and I say name, VJ Windows, SSM Windows, we're going to see I have that one instance. We can choose my Windows Security Baseline. Next, Windows SSM job. And this time we're going to again send it through the Amazon EC2 run command. This time we're giving it the PowerShell script, still with all that same configuration information for InSpec, so that InSpec can go ahead and report back over to Automate. So it's running right now, and we're going to let it run for a second. And while we let it run, we're going to turn on the special little feature flag. So if you don't know about this, this is like, so they mentioned this morning that Azure is coming soon. Azure is in development right now. The Azure integration is in development right now. So if we type FEAT, we're going to see this little thing that says Azure Node Manager off, on. So with it on, what we can do is we can, while this is running, go over to the integrations and add a new integration. And now we're going to click Azure. And for this one, because like we said, it's under feature flag, because we don't have the permissionless scanning, it is coming in the next month's time. We are working on it. But for now, what we're going to do is we're just going to do the traditional Azure scan with the client ID, client secret, and tenant ID. So if I say test VM, Azure, and then I'm going to have to echo these out, and don't copy them because I'm going to invalidate them like right after this thing. So don't do that, okay? Thanks. So I'm just going to get all of these real quick, stop writing things down, because again, I told you I'm just going to deactivate these in a minute. I just am terrible at clipboard copying, so I didn't want to bother. So we're going to add in the client ID, and then I'm going to switch over a bunch of times because that's fun. And we're going to add in my client secret. Then we're going to do that again, no more pictures. Tenant ID, and what we can do here is I actually already added an SSH credential that had my name, well, VJ, that's not my real name, VJ as the username, and my private key. And that's the information I use to spin up those Azure instances. So because I don't have permissionless yet, what I can actually do is I can add new credential associations by tag key value. I promise this looks better when you're not squished into like whatever this is mode. But here I can say I know that they have test and that value VJ is on both of those instances, and we can go over and check that over here, right? So I have Ubuntu VJ and Ubuntu East, and if we went into here, we would see that it says SSH VJ there. We would also see, if we go back one, oh God, it's really hard to find things now, y'alls. All right, here. So if we come down here, you'll see that the tag says test VJ, right? So I'm going to use that same tag association right here, and I'm gonna click my little VJ SSH key, and I'm going to save the integration. Now this is again going to go and discover all the nodes that are available, all the VMs, because it's Azure, that are available to this account, and add them to our database so that we have a reference. We're not saving any like special safety information or anything when we do this. We're just trying to have a bit of a logbook of all of the nodes in your infrastructure so that we know about the node lifecycle. Because we'd like to help you know about your node lifecycle. That was, right? It was a little repetitive, but it's all good. So now we've got the test VM Azure coming in, and it's going to go and collect out all those nodes. And you can see that we're getting more nodes as we speak. And while we were doing all that, the Windows SSM job finished. So now we can go over and check, yes, we ran on that one node. That was our VJ SSM Windows. Everything worked out. As you can see, it's not secure because they're just instances I pulled up this morning using the little Amazon EC2 launch instance. I didn't try to make them anything special. I just wanted to show, by the way, if you pull up an Amazon EC2 instance just like that, that's how insecure it is. So you should secure them. And now, if we come back over to clear this filter and come back over to the scan jobs, we're going to see that we now have 5 reachable nodes. Why do we have 5 reachable nodes? Because we now added that VJ Ubuntu East and Ubuntu VJ UK West that we saw when we were over here, right? So those 2 instances are now there, and we can run a job on them. So we can go over to the scan jobs and say create a new job, and now we're going to have, hey, test VM Azure has 7 available nodes, because there's more than just my 2 nodes in that account. Other people have nodes in there. But I'm only interested in testing mine, so I'm going to say include the ones that have test and VJ as a tag, and I'm going to run the Ubuntu East one. Now, the reason the Azure stuff is behind feature flag is because we are still having some trouble with the filtering and ensuring that we can filter on multiple tags at once. So that is coming in the next months, but we're going to show you what we got now. So I'm going to test it on the VJ Ubuntu East. I'm going to go next. Then I'm just going to click whatever profile I want and do test job Azure. And we're going to let that run. Now, we just showed you the EC2 and the VM scanning via the integrations with the automatic node discovery, the credentialless stuff for AWS, or with credentials with Azure. You also have the option, if you weren't running Automate in EC2, to do that same credentials by tags association with the AWS bits. But now there were those other 2 hot, cool things that we mentioned at the beginning, which is that InSpec 2 now allows us to do those account service scannings with AWS and Azure backends, right? So now what we can do is we can add an integration for AWS. We'll again read my credentials from my EC2 environment, but this time we're going to leave it on the service type of API. So we're going to say API account scanning manager no creds. These are terrible names, but that's fine. And then we're going to save the integration. Again, it's going to go out and do some of those dry runs to ensure we have the permissions. And now if we go back over to the scan jobs, we're going to see even more reachable nodes. Because now what we did when we did that was we went ahead and ran an InSpec detect on all of those regions, and we saw that we can reach them. So you'll see the name of the account, the short name of this account is Chef CD, and then we attached the region to each one of them. So you can see we have several more reachable nodes here. Now if we come back over to the scan jobs, first we can go check on our Azure job, and we see that we have our one node, which was our VJ Ubuntu East one. That was the Azure node that we just ran, right? So now we can run a scan job on our API account scanning, and you'll see there's 15 available nodes. That's because there's 15 regions in the account. And the word node is a little bit of a bloated word here. We're thinking of them more as scannables. It's the target that InSpec uses, so it's a scannable, it's a node. So if we come here, we'll see we can select any one of the regions. I'm just going to say, hey, give me US East 1, because that's the one I want. And next. Now, one of the great things is that we already have that CIS AWS Foundations benchmark profile. So we can use that AWS Foundations profile to test our account scans. The control that Rick showed you earlier today was one of the controls that we ripped right out of that profile. So if we click this one, And next, really? 5 minutes? People, that's not a lot of time. Okay, API job. So we're going to let the API job run. And I'm going to go ahead and add one more tiny quick one. So we're going to go back over to the integrations while that job runs, and we're going to add an integration for the Azure API and, oh man, I'm going to have to, all right, Azure API scan. And again, don't copy my creds because I'm going to tell our IT people to activate my creds in a second. So be nice, be lovely, because we're trying to make Automate better for you. So, you know, be nice. And I'm going to copy these all over real quick and do an Azure API scan. Now, on the Azure side of things, we're not actually targeting the regions. We're targeting the subscriptions. So if we go back over to scan jobs, we have so many nodes now, and you'll see that one of those nodes is going to be our InSpec subscription as soon as the scan job finishes, but it might take a second. So while we wait for that to come up, we can go see the API job, and we see here that we have a report on US East 1, and we could go in and drill in and see, oh man, it looks like there are some failures here, and some things are blue, some things are purple, some things are not so great, so we clearly have a little bit of work to be done there. Now, if we go back over to the nodes, I believe that job is still running. So just ignore that it's still running, but there is an InSpec subscription being added here, and it is the same concept as the AWS one, where we can add a job on those as well.
Yeah.
So those are integrations into Automate. How much time do we have left?
3 minutes.
3 minutes, and then we still have time for questions? Yeah? No? Okay, questions. What questions can we answer for you?
Just want to know, is that a single server back for the back end for this? Just one server for your Automate?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not sure if you mentioned this or showed this. What's its limitations, if any, for handling multiple, like AWS accounts, for example?
Federated accounts. That is next on my list. So my next 2 things I'm working on is federated accounts for AWS. You could, of course, add individual accounts as you wanted to, but if you're wanting to do the permissionless thing where, hey, I have access to these other 19 accounts and they're all federated together, those are the next steps, is getting Azure to a good place where we can unfeature flag and then enabling the federated accounts on AWS.
So for example, having multiple accounts that are all handled by cross-account roles is what you're referring to, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
And to piggyback on that a bit, the scope of an individual InSpec run is basically per account per region. So you can't currently have a run that would talk to multiple regions at the same time. You would instead have to do that in 2 separate runs.
Which is what we do, which is how we allow you to do that in compliance, right? Is where we're individually running InSpec exec AWS : US East 1, blah, blah, AP Northeast 1, and we have 10 InSpec agents always running, concurrently grabbing jobs and seeing if there's any more available jobs and running them and reporting back.
So my question is just as far as the API calls that it's using to hit your Amazon account. Do we get charged for those?
Charged for those?
Yeah, the API calls. A lot of integrations that AWS uses for the API calls that are chargeable.
To be honest, I have never heard that question before. All I'm doing is calling out to like EC2 describe instances, EC2 describe regions with your AWS cred. So
Yeah, right, Chef doesn't pay for that.
yeah.
In answer to your
promise
question,
you that.
Yeah.
Primarily though, InSpec and Automate really only call describes, gets, lists, that sort of thing. So aside from like maybe hitting a big rate limit or something like that, that's the worst of it. We're not like shipping huge gigabytes of data out or anything like that.
Right. It's all read APIs with the exception of the SSM full access, which we need to be able to run your SSM job. But everything else is just read only.
This stuff is fun though, seriously. 40 minutes is not enough
Yeah.
only scratches the surface of what's in this. And of course, as Victoria mentioned, it does not look like this. This is the compression of a screen at its worst. But just everything that we've covered here and the ability to click around without sitting there watching an hourglass makes it delightful, and it's getting better every single day. But we think it's delightful right now.
And thank you for coming, and
Yeah.
thank you for listening to us, and all of that.